over? Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Give me just a second. Apologize for the delay today because we are. I've been really scrambling to get ready for today. Well, let's open a word of prayer first, then I can start whining. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you will bless our time together as we discuss some of the things that are going on in the world and things that seem to indicate pointing to your return. We pray that you'll bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm trying to send myself something here because it's not working. Yeah. Well, I'll try it later. So, according to plan, as you see now, I've turned my split earth into Earth Pac-Man to maybe we can play off some of that theme as we come through in the years. Look, I did a radio program this week, which requires some preparation, a lot of preparation in reading. I also did a midweek update on Thursday, and then some other things. So, I will confess my preparation for today is not where I usually like it to be because I'm sort of disjointed. You'll see I have notes, I have my iPhone, I have my iPad up here, and none of which have on here what I really want. So we talk each week. These are some of the platforms that we're on, and we're trying to work on getting more. Someone did write to me this week, and I will get back to you. The convergence of events. There's a lot of things going on in the world. We try to limit it to just a few less this week than I normally do. Because some weeks I know listening to me is sort of like sipping water from a fire hose. And I try not to do that, but it's just, I talk about these things each week. I talk about the acceleration, the convergence, logistics, understanding, these things that we're going to know more as we get closer to the return of the Lord. And things are going to come into focus. We're going to understand exactly how these different things are going to play out. I was talking to someone the other day about, I mean, it was Charles, about Bible prophecy. And sometimes there's these prophecies that are just sort of hanging there, like we're talking about the first coming of the Lord. There were a lot of prophecies. And as I've told you, there was an acceleration and convergence there in that about 60%, 59, 58% of them were fulfilled in the last week. And if that's the pattern for the future, you're going to find that a lot of these prophecies are fulfilled. Now, they build up. There's a process to them coming to be fulfilled. So we were talking about one, the prophecy in Isaiah, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. And I've often thought, did anybody really understand that until it had taken place? I mean, were there rabbis going around Israel looking for pregnant virgins before the Messiah came? I mean, I'm serious. I mean, there's no record that they were. But then when you get into Matthew, it just says, yeah, this is that which was prophesied. And so I think that's going to be sort of like that as we get really close to this time before the Lord returns, that we're going to see things. There's going to be scriptures that are going to sort of leap to life, and we're going to say, well, I didn't think I'd see that one. I wasn't even looking for that one, because I think there are things that are going to be like that. Because that's what happened the first time, I think it's going to happen the second time. So let's just go. Some of this will be a little bit of a review of some things that we've talked about before. There's this concern with the power grid. Some of you may have noticed utility bills going up, sometimes pretty significantly. There is a major natural gas crunch in the world. I'll talk a little bit about that more lately, because I think as it relates to Israel and Bible prophecy, I think there's some significant things going on in the Middle East. And I talk about it a lot because it keeps coming up and everybody keeps talking about it. So I think that we need to be watching these things. This world energy situation is a big problem. I'll talk in a moment about what I think is maybe a harbinger of like some of the things we're going to see with the horsemen of Revelation, one of which is famine. And these are sequential, and they build upon each other. But their effects go on for a long time once they start. We're in a serious, we're starting to get into a serious food crunch. I don't know, and it depends on where you live, how that will affect you. I mean, some places are always struggling just to get by anyway, and in America, we've always had an abundance of food and options and that sort of thing, and those are not going to be great. I saw some statistics. I don't even have slides for some of this stuff. There's some statistics that I heard about this week and was reading. As you know, I've worked in the banking sector for a lot of my career. It is my understanding that somewhere around 50 to 60% of small business owners did not pay their rent in June. And a lot of those have said they're done by the end of the year. Now, there seems to have been, with the lockdowns for Charlie Vector and the looming lockdowns for the simian pox, the monkey pox, I just think that there was a design to shut down small businesses. And it worked, and there's been a devastating impact on small businesses. Now, you haven't seen, I can speak from someone who works in the sector, you've not seen a lot of foreclosures on businesses. In fact, you've seen virtually zero now for over 2 years. What the banks are doing, as best as I can understand and talk to bankers, is the banks are just extending out loans. It's sort of like pushing off D-Day. Eventually, it comes time to pay the piper. And there could be a devastating impact in the commercial property sector. A lot of things are going to close. My understanding is Amazon has closed a couple of its warehouses across the country because of lack of workers and decreasing inventories. And each of these little things sort of ripples through the economy in its own different way. I want to make, I'll comment about this first, a couple things. So this is a report from American, what do they call it? It used to be Grand Canyon College, Arizona Christian University. And George Barna, I think, is there and doing these research. And this is a report of his that was released within the last month or so in a series of releases, and the last one of which came out on May 24th. And this would indicate sort of, this is really where we are. This is why there are problems in the church. And I haven't talked about that much lately, but I continue to see the things that I've been concerned about for 20, 30 years going on in the church. They've continued. But here, look at this one. It says, only half of evangelical pastors possess a biblical worldview, the incidence even lower for most denominations. Subsequent to revealing this, they said that 37% of all Christian pastors have a biblical worldview. And the biblical worldview that Barna's used in his research for years is pretty basic. You know, you believe in the virgin birth, the inerrancy of Scripture, the atoning work of Jesus Christ, the resurrection. It's about 5 or 6 things. And it's really pretty basic stuff. Now we're to the point, though, where it says only 37% of all Christian pastors hold to that. non-denominational independent pastors, 57%, evangelical Protestant, 51%, charismatic Pentecostal, 37%, traditionally black Protestant, 9%, Roman Catholic, 6%. And that's based on his study conducted in February, March of this year on American Worldview Inventory. And here's a quote out of this report. Proportions among denominational groups. Of the 7 denominational groups evaluated, only 2 featured at least half of their pastors possessing a biblical worldview. Those were the non-denominational and independent churches with 57% and evangelical churches with 51%. Down at the bottom, the last paragraph, Baptist churches, which are widely regarded as among those most likely to embrace the Bible as God's inerrant word, did not live up to that stereotype. Slightly less than 1/2 of the pastors serving at Baptist churches have a biblical worldview. The exception was pastors of Southern Baptist churches, where about 3/4 have consistently biblical beliefs and behavior. And then here was another release, shocking results concerning the worldview of Christians, or pastors. And this was the prior release. So they looked at pastor roles within the church. And here's what they found in those. All Christian pastors, 37%. Senior lead pastor, 41% possess a biblical worldview. Associate assistant pastors, 28%. Teaching pastor, 13%. Children's youth pastors, 12%. Executive pastor, 4%. That's pretty shocking stuff. So I'm going to talk, I did this in my update on Thursday, and I know not as many people watch that as watch on Sunday. So I'll cover a couple topics again, just for emphasis. So back in 1980, 79-80, there was a granite monument, tons of granite engraved were erected in northern Georgia, about 100 miles north of Atlanta, called the Georgia Guidestones. And here's a little video that I was able to dig out that what happened when they were dedicated. This would have been, I think, in 1980. Here's just a little video of this. In 1980, they didn't have widescreen TVs.
Over 951 cubic feet of granite make up the 11 pieces of the monument. The overall height is 19 feet 3 inches from the surface of the ground to the top of the capstone. There are slots and holes in the center stone that have astrological significance because they have been cut at precise angles to permit accurate readings of the sun and moon at various times of the year.
Standing on the highest point of Elbert County, the Georgia Guidestones have raised a lot of questions. 4 upright stones more than 16 feet high, with support stones totaling almost 238,000 pounds. And there's a message sandblasted in 12 languages in letters 2 inches tall. The sponsors of the mysterious project are said to be an anonymous group of out-of-state Americans promoting the concept of the conservation of mankind. Here's the mystery, though. Elberton granite businessman Joe Fenley was contacted to build the project by a man using the fictitious name of R.C. Christian. Granite City Bank President Wyatt Martin served as intermediary, handled the escrow account for all funds, and says he'll carry the secret of who R.C. Christian is to his grave. The sense of permanence is there, and we do know this. The Georgia Guidestones are some of the largest granite monuments ever erected, and they can be seen for years to come on Georgia Highway 77, 7 miles north of Elberton.
And so they've been there since 1980 now. The Guidestones, they have different panels. They're in, 9 or 12 or 13 or 21 different languages. It's been called the American Stonehenge. Stonehenge, the original one, it's been there for thousands of years. I and it's tied to the sun cycles, the summer equinox and that sort of thing. I've often laughed at somebody posted a memo on Facebook or someplace once about, the time change when they have to do the time change at Stonehenge. They had cranes and everything out there to move it around. But and that's probably an American joke that a lot of people won't get. So because we have this some kind of belief of daylight savings time, but it doesn't change the amount of daylight that we actually have. But I guess we like to sleep in a little bit, so we have the light in the evening rather than more in the morning. But one of the things on the Guidestone, this was a thing it says here that let these be Guidestones to an age of reason. And they have a very new age thing to them, and a lot of people have attached a lot of significance to them. And one of the ones that's always caused people concern is maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Well, that would require getting rid of a lot of people. When the Guidestones were first put up or started in 1979, there were 4.357 billion people in the world. So even back then, it would require getting rid of about 4 billion people. Well, today, in 2022, we're right at about 8 billion people in the world. So the one thing that's good about it is I know that this is the goal of a lot of people and a lot of people that would be associated with Davos and the World Economic Forum. So the good news is if their goal is to reduce world population to 500 million, they haven't done a very good job. Because world population has gone up about 80% since they were erected. Now, that doesn't mean it's changed their goal. It just means they're just, which leads some people to believe that there's a lot of government people involved because they're just not very efficient and good at it. So I don't know, but I don't want to minimize because I think these things are or were fairly important. And what happened the other night was, and you can get the video, and there's, of course, like everything else, there's controversy about it. People are arguing about how they were destroyed because this is a picture of them the other day. They were hit with a bomb. Some people say they were hit with a lightning strike. I have seen a video where you can see a shadowy figure running up to the monument and then running back, and then it later explodes. So I'm not convinced that it's a lightning strike. A lot of people want to believe that God took them out. The fact of the matter is they've been destroyed now. It even made, this is a bottom of the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution the other day, talking about the fact that they were damaged in an explosion. And the result of that was, I have the video in my Wednesday update, they came in and it pretty much pulverized one of the sections that caused the other sections to become unstable. And as a result of that, they brought out a backhoe and they knocked the thing down. So it's gone. It's been reduced to rubble. The Georgia prosecutor said we're going to find who did this and prosecute them to the full extent of the law. And maybe they'll find them, maybe they don't. I'm not shedding any tears over it. And I don't know that it has a huge religious Bible prophecy significance or anything like that, other than the fact that it is, in some sense, symbolic of what's going to happen to these people who are pushing this new world order. I think that's pretty clear. So we think that, they're gone. If you never went to see them, I know a lot of people have prayed for their destruction, so I guess the simple thing would be to say that their prayers have been answered. Now, I want to talk about one other thing that I don't have any slides for. I had all kinds of material, but I just did not have time to put it into slides. We have this committee that's meeting in Congress in the United States. I want you to pay attention to some parallels that are taking place in different governments around the world. For example, I am continually amazed at the parallels between the government of the United States and leaders and that type of thing, and the court system and how it's operating, and what's going on in Israel. And I would say the same thing would hold true for the UK in many respects. So when we see things like a former president being attacked in the courts and that sort of thing, understand that this is going on with regard to Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. And a lot of people, they don't like Netanyahu. They really, they don't. So there's a movement there that's grown up that's, the anti-Trumpers have the anti-Bibi crowd. There's a parallel there. The way that, in my view, the court system has been abused is just absolutely shocking. I don't even have the slides on this. I have all these pictures on my hard drive. Did you see what happened in New York City and Harlem the other night, where a guy's working in a convenience store and I think he's Hispanic, and a black guy comes in and starts beating him? I mean, he would have beat him to death. And the guy fought back and resisted, and he had a knife, the Hispanic guy. And he stabbed the guy and killed him. So you would think, pretty clear case. I mean, you can watch the video. Pretty clear case of self-defense. Nope. He was charged with second-degree murder by that lunatic, Soros-funded prosecutor that they have in New York City now. And the message that's sent is, if you're attacked, don't you dare fight back. Who do you think you are, fighting back and protecting your own life? You're not allowed to do that. By the way, the guy was a convicted felon, had served a number of prison terms for assault. And now the prosecutor's coming out and said, well, we've reconsidered, we've reduced his bail to $50,000. It's such a clear case. But he may have killed someone from the wrong ethnic group that you're not allowed to do anything about. It's pretty shocking. I also heard that, I'll talk about some protests that are continuing to go on up in Canada. They had Canada Day the other day, and they had arrested some of the leaders. Remember the trucker thing back in the winter in Ottawa and all across Canada? One of the leaders of that had been arrested and put in jail, and one of her bail conditions, my understanding is, I cannot remember her name, was that she not have any contact with anybody else that was involved. And apparently she did. So when Canada Day comes up, she's back in jail. We still have people sitting in jail from January of 2021, who, by the way, the crime they may face would be a charge that would only get them a 1 year in prison at most. But they've already been in over a year awaiting trial. This is a political thing. This is happening in a number of cultures. I saw video of people confronting Justin Trudeau, baby Trudeau, yesterday, saying, we're going to let these people out of jail. And he's just like, oh, I can't hear you, And we know what he did to those truckers and everything. Now, there was also a thing in Congress. Actually, while I'm talking, I'm going to try to find the video, because I think it does show. You remember there was this lady, she was supposedly somebody who worked in the White House press office, and she was, not White House press office, but in the administration of Donald Trump, and she was an assistant, and she was brought before the commission that's doing hearings on this the other day, and she was, now I see, I'm just going to have to I can see I'm going to have to do a midweek update because I'll just tell you about it. How about that? Because I'm not going to find this thing. So, Cassidy Hutchinson, I think was her name. She's brought and she testifies, and she says, you know, I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who, you know, that song. She says, I heard it from someone who heard it from someone that, you know, Trump leaped over the seat back from the back seat to the front seat of the car, assaulted a couple of Secret Service men, and he was going to go to the Capitol to be with his people and participate in they call it an insurrection. It was not an insurrection. But look, people doing things they shouldn't have done that day, but I don't think by any stretch of imagination it's an insurrection. But this is the narrative. You've got to believe the narrative about what happened that day. Well, you know, now President Trump, I just don't see him leaping over the back seat of an SUV and assaulting the Secret Service guys. And what they found was some people they did something like, well, you know, when she says that this happened, maybe we ought to go to the people who were there and ask them, like, what do the Secret Service guys say? And my understanding is, and this could change, that the Secret Service guys have said, that didn't happen. It didn't happen. But what did you see? I mean, the front page of the Washington Post, the New York Slimes, and all these people, the incredibly credible Cassidy Hutchinson and her testimony, and they had like 2, 3, 4 pages of inside the paper talk about how credible she was and how wonderful she was, and she had brought this, and this proves that, you know, we could never have this man as president again because he was doing this. But the Secret Service guys who were there say that didn't happen. And they don't have any interest in lying, to be honest with you, because they work for the presidents from different parties and different administrations. And so we've had this weaponization of the legal system in our country. So there's a congressman, his name, I think he is from Maryland. His name is Jamie Raskin. He is a radical leftist. And he's on this committee that's holding these hearings. So he's on CNN, and the CNN guy goes, I have the video clip somewhere on my computer, says, Congressman Raskin, what about Secret Service agents who are saying something else than what Cassidy Hutchinson testified to? And now this is where the trial lawyer thing comes in, because when somebody deliberately does not answer your question, a very simple question, like, well, what about the Secret Service agents? They are saying this, and they've been interviewed by the committee. They know what they said. Raskin goes, Cassidy Hutchinson was a very credible witness. That wasn't the question. The question was, what do you think about what the Secret Service agents said? Cassidy Hutchinson was a very credible witness. And this is what's so frustrating. Because these people, they just lie. And this is happening too. And the same thing, I'm telling you, a little clip I was able to read in the news this morning, Israeli government has fallen. And they're going to go to elections. And right now, the person who looks like he or she has the best chance of forming a government in the elections on November, I think they're going to be on November 1st, is Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, they have this goofy, I'm sorry, I've read a lot about the case. I know that will have friends who will disagree with me strongly on this, and I don't care, because it is a sham what's going on with Benjamin Netanyahu. It is a totally put up job. It's parallel to what's going on in the United States. And they have some lady who's going to come in one of the cases against Netanyahu, who's going to testify, and she's going to nail Netanyahu to the wall. Maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But I'm just saying there's this parallel that's happening. At the same time, there's the economic thing. This is a chart I used last week that shows the forward contract price for electricity in Germany. Hamburg and other places in Germany have put in forward-looking rationing of hot water and that type of thing that are coming. Now, summer, so it's not that big a deal, but it gets pretty cold in Germany. This winter could be very, very dicey, but you see here the price went from 50 to over 200, 4-time increase. But look at the dates, because everybody, everybody's blaming Vladimir Putin for this, and I'm no fan of Putin. And every time I say that, I immediately get emails from people, oh, you just don't understand. You're not guided by the Holy Spirit because you don't like Vladimir Putin. He's the only thing that's protecting the West. And I don't believe that, okay? So, but the war didn't start until that red line, the invasion of Ukraine. So you can see that the prices went way up before the war, and they're going to go up even further. The other thing that's happening is, and this is happening all over the world, they are putting in place restrictions on farmers. Now, some of that is because of lack of supplies and inputs. I think I shared what a friend of mine who's a farmer had shared. Prices that he has to pay has gone up 2.5 to 4 times for fertilizer and that sort of thing. And and if you live in a place where the weather varies from year to year, remember was it just 4 years ago maybe that over 50% of the Ohio farmland did not even get planted for a whole season because of excess rain. So I mean, if you're writing out big checks all the time, it's sort of like playing, at the casino. You hope that the weather's going to hold and that everything's going to be okay. And it goes up and down. Remember, we had an incredibly wet spring here. Things were late getting planted in many cases. And then my yard turned into like a crusty mess. And then we had rain this week, and now everything's greened up again. So if you don't like the weather in Ohio, the saying is wait 20 minutes. But the other part of what's happening is with the green agenda, 2030 goals, all the stuff that's supported by Davos and ESG, environmental, social, and governments, the environmental part, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the ESG movement that is pushed by people like BlackRock. And I have a clip of Larry Fink from 2017, and he says, we at BlackRock, we are trying to force people into certain behaviors. He's a corporation. He manages a lot of money. And he views his role as to change things. So he's a big supporter of this ESG nonsense. The Saudis funded and push it. So do the Soviets, the Russians. Sorry, I still grew up with the Soviet Union, and so sometimes I slip. But I also recognize that Vladimir Putin has said the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then he acts like he would like to reconstitute it. So, I take a look at that. But so right now we have these farmer protests going on in the Netherlands. They have come in and they have told people, you have got to cut back on nitrogen and fertilizer and get rid of 30 to 50% of your livestock or the fertilizer that you use for your crops. And farming in the Netherlands goes way back. I mean, they've had to reclaim the land from the sea. It is the second largest food exporting country in the world. Did you know that? And so all of these Davos people are coming in and saying, man, you guys got to cut back. And I was reading a Dutch person who supports the cuts back and saying, it only means that 30% of them are going out of business. What's the big deal? This is a family thing. And so one of these protests, the kid was driving a tractor away from the thing and the police shot at him, which is kind of unusual in the Netherlands anyway, because they just don't use guns over there. So here's a little video clip, a montage of some of the things that are going on with a interview of Tucker Carlson and a young lady who is a lawyer. And she's the Dutch columnist that I read described her as a pro-Trump milkmaid. So it's okay to be a sexist like that, I guess, as long as you oppose her. She's very articulate. We love lawyers here. And so here she was on Tucker Carlson the other night talking a bit about what's going on.
Well, very simple, Tucker. What this is about is the Dutch government stealing our farmers' land. And they're doing this under the guise of a made-up nitrogen crisis. And that is basically going to put most of these farmers completely out of business. And thankfully, the Dutch farmers aren't having it. So they're going out on the streets, they're blocking distribution centers, they've blocked the high roads, they are fighting back. And they're right to do so. This is their life's work. They're really at their wits' end. They're devastated by what the government is doing. And, well, it's very clear that the government is not doing this because of a nitrogen crisis. They're doing this because they want these farmers' land and they want it to house new immigrants. They also want it because the farmers are obviously standing in their way of the great reset plans that they have for us. So, yeah, farmers are hardworking, God-fearing, and especially self-sufficient people that are just standing in the way of their globalist agenda. And it's driving a lot of these farmers even to something like suicide. So really, there's only one term that we can use for the things that our government under Premier Mark Rutte is doing right now, and that is communism.
So messing with a food supply tends to cause food crises and then famines. You're seeing this in the developing world, thanks to climate activism and the war in Ukraine. Are normal Dutch citizens who aren't farmers worried about what happens when you shut the farms down?
Absolutely. They understand it. No farmers, no food. And that's why the farmers have blocked these distribution centers, because within a matter of a couple of hours, we saw that the supermarkets were empty. And ordinary citizens understand this. The problem is that the state doesn't seem to understand this, or it's what they want. And the police have responded in an incredibly violent way. So as you guys have seen now, they have even shot at a 16-year-old boy. These are not things that you should see in free Western countries, especially not targeted towards peaceful protesters, but it's happening. And not just the Dutch people, everyone around the world, and especially you in America, should be supporting our Dutch farmers because, well, this could be happening to you. It's actually the very reason why I'm wearing this handkerchief right now. It's become the symbol of these farmers' resistance, and they're doing it so courageously, and they have the manpower to do it, so they really deserve your full support.
So, very articulate, milkmaid. What a disgusting world we live in that we have to put up with stuff like that. But these things are going on all over the place. In Sri Lanka, have you seen what's going on in Sri Lanka? Street riots. They stormed the palace of the president in Sri Lanka. They were using his pool too. But part of the problem was, and this is an article from Foreign Policy back in March, saying that they thought there were going to be major problems and riots in Sri Lanka because what Sri Lanka did was they bought into this green agenda. And so they said, okay, you farmers, you have to do organic farming right now, starting right now. Now, I'm not against organic farming, okay? But there's a reality in the world that people have to live with. And shifting over is going to cause a lot of suffering and death, especially in the way that they did it. And what they found was that within about 8 weeks, crop and yields were down 50%. So Sri Lanka went from being a country that exported rice to a country that had to import rice. And now they're importing rice in the midst of a war between two of the major wheat producers in the world, which is locking up a lot of wheat. And so now the country is completely falling apart. The banking system is done. I saw a video of the president fleeing to a ship to get out of town, get off the island. That's Sri Lanka. They're a major tea exporter, and they've ruined the country. Now, the Green Agenda people, AOC and that kind of crowd, this is great. It's less mouths to feed, I guess. There's other places. I mean, we have major problems in our country with drought. The drought in the southwest part of the United States, from western Kansas to the coast, is just absolutely shocking. I have not seen a change. And now here's another one. Italy's farmers wilt in the worst drought for decades. Well, Italy's a major food producer. It almost seems like there's something going on, that somebody's trying to get somebody else's attention, don't you think? I mean, at some point we can explain it away from, climate change and all this other stuff, but at some point we know that one of the messianic signs of someone who was the Messiah, remember when he stopped the storm on the Sea of Galilee and they said, "What manner of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him?" And we shouldn't be taking so quick to explain everything away from natural phenomenon and take God out of the equation. Mentioned this Wednesday or Thursday in my update. We have an oil supply issue. You might have noticed that the price of gas has gone up. Now it's eased a little bit. Part of that is because demand has gone down. People just aren't going places. But we have a strategic petroleum reserve that's for emergencies. And now it came out, this is reported by Reuters. This isn't by, the Federalist or National Review or some other right-wing extremist purveyor of misinformation. This is from Reuters. And what they found is they started looking at, where's the strategic petroleum reserves? Where's that oil going? It's not going to very much to here in the United States. They're shipping it overseas. 1 million barrels were sold to China. We're in conflict with China. We're effectively at war with China. And yet and it appears that a company that was co-founded by the son of a certain president was the one who brokered the oil to China. Funny how that works out. And it says about 1 million barrels per day is being released. So on CNN, they had one of the economic advisors from the White House, a guy who used to work for BlackRock, and the CNN interviewer said, "Hey, what about this strategic petroleum reserve? And people are complaining about gas prices. What are you doing?" Listen to this answer.
National intelligence, they said that this could be a long war measured in years, and I think everybody understands why this is happening, but is it sustainable? What do you say to those families who say, listen, we can't afford to pay $4.85 a gallon for months, if not years. This is just not sustainable.
Well, what you heard from the president today was a clear articulation of the stakes. This is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand firm. But at the same time, what I'd say to that family and to Americans across the country is you have a president and administration that is going to do everything in its power to blunt those price increases.
Yeah. That's where you know he's lying, because nothing what he says comports with the truth. So where is all of this coming from? This restrictions on farmers and that type of thing. And they're concerned about farmer protests up in Canada. So you have Italy, you have the Netherlands, you have Sri Lanka. There's riots and protests going on in Ecuador, which is another major. If you look at your vegetables sometimes in the store, you'll see that they come from Ecuador or Peru or South America. And it's just like everywhere. And so what's it coming from? Is there a plan? Well, so here's a report. This is a great website you might want to check out called The Sociable, where especially this guy named Tim Hinchcliffe writes, this is from a few months ago, World Economic Forum and World Trade Organization push global digital identity of persons and objects. We, the people, risk becoming they, the product, as a service for those who control the data and set digital identity policies. Great article. There's another one that he wrote that this just came out the other day. World Economic Forum pushes digital ID, CBDC, that's central bank digital currencies, ESG, and crackdowns on misinformation in a future-focused report. I'm going to talk more about this in another update in the future. There was this report that came out just this last week from the World Economic Forum. And it's always interesting. In a related article, this is from back in February, Michael Reckenwald, who used to be a left-winger at New York University, and sort of saw the light and said, this left-wing thing, they really have these plans that are not very good. So he's written extensively. This is at the Independent Institute. He's also written at the Mises Institute, MISES. Highly recommend his articles. I think he did about a 6-part series over at Mises. This is sort of a summary of those 6 parts. What is the Great Reset at the World Economic Forum? And he says, this is the plan. They want to control everything. And it's interesting, as he relates in this article, whenever you talk about the Great Reset, what's the response? That's just a conspiracy theory. So you can play a clip of Justin Trudeau saying, which I have done, saying, this is a perfect opportunity, this pandemic is a perfect opportunity for a great reset. And if you say that, immediately there'll be articles in all the fact-checking places, the propaganda control arm of the government, saying, well, that's just not true. That's fake. That's misinformation. That's disinformation. That's malinformation. Now they have a whole series of words to describe it. And we have whole departments that are designed to control that. And so this report that came out from the World Economic Forum has a section, and again, I'll talk more detail about it in a future update or presentation that I'm putting together, that one of the things that they're concerned about is misinformation. You're going to hear this. And so we have this, so we know that Klaus Schwab did this. We know that Klaus Schwab wrote these 2 books last year or over the last couple of years, COVID-19, The Great Reset, and then The Great Narrative. And in this article that was published on, oops, I've got the wrong one here. Just a couple days ago. The WEF pushes digital ID, CBDCs, and that sort of thing. That article by Tim Hinchcliffe. He talks about the fact that this is what they want to do, is they want to set up these narratives because they want to control what you think. And this is very scary. They have these things, and one of the things they're pushing is a thing called, this is a screenshot from one of the things in the article that I'm just referencing about digital identity. They want to control this, telecommunications, e-government, social platforms, e-commerce, humanitarian response, travel and mobility. I read someplace where they're putting in more digital passports, health passports in some places. So this is what the future appears to be like. And I don't remember if I did this last Sunday or I did it on my update on Thursday. See, I don't even remember what I talked about sometimes. But that's no excuse for you. But this is a New York Times article. Can't see when that is. That just came out recently about the surveillance state in China. where they have 500 million cameras watching what everybody does. And they're trying to tie everything together, even down to, there was a bidding document. This is a New York Times video that they did about, getting things together. And one of the things they talked about, video capture cameras, they talked about mobile device collection information, collecting your iris and DNA for men. And so the New York Times, I'll give them credit, they went through and they did a very, very good job about tearing this apart. And they've been, I know a lot of people don't like it and they hate it when I talk about it, but I want to give credit where credit is due. Remember back in the spring break, right after the COVID-19 lockdown started a couple of years ago, they did they went and got data from cell phones and showed where everybody was going, where they came from and where they went after they went to Florida, because they thought they could track where everything was. Now when somebody does that for something else that might be related to, mules and that type of, well, you can't rely on that information. But they did a great job of publishing that. I think they even did the Daytona 500 tracking. And so there's all this tracking, this is going on. So, and the world is in a state of disruption. So here is Boris Johnson. He, for whatever reason, there were some people in his cabinet ministers, about 50 of them resigned, more than ever in British history. And some of them did it on principle, and some of them did it because they thought this was a way to protect themselves to further their political career down the road. So the UK will go to elections for a prime minister. Now, he's going to serve as a caretaker prime minister until the elections are held. A lot of people are not happy about that. Here was an interesting editorial in the cartoon I found. Get me another one. That's Klaus Schwab, because he wanted to control it and he didn't like the way things were going. A lot of flights canceled everywhere you look. I talked about that. A lot of drought, bad weather, dry weather in the southwest United States, all the way down into Texas. We've got some major problems. Oh, here it is. I did have a thing on this. Here is this justice gone mad. Here's the guy being attacked in the store in Harlem. And then here's, I have the video, but I didn't want to play it. And so he fights the guy off and he stabs him and kills him. But the DA comes out and says, well, I'm sympathetic, so I'm going to have his bail reduced to $50,000. That's great. Now let's talk about this. I want to talk about some of the fallout from Roe. This is one of our favorite senators, Senator Liz Warren, former Harvard Law professor, sometimes known in circles that I run in as Pocahontas. Remember, she claimed she was of Indian descent, and nobody could really find anything in her background, maybe 164th. So that's why they call her Faux, F-A-U-X, Kahanas. And she's talking about this with Roe gone. Now what's she attacking? So everybody's concerned. So she's like, we got to stop these crisis pregnancy centers. These things are evil. Here's a little clip of what she said.
Senator Warren also taking aim at pregnancy.
Okay. I'm not sure why my sound went out here. Let me try again. It's a blessing from the Lord, right? Well, here's what she said. She put it in her tweet, and she's like, these crisis pregnancy centers, these things they're awful. You can't trust them, We have to crack down on these pregnancy centers. Why? There are 3 times as many of these as there are abortion clinics. So what? I guess you would be upset about that fact if you were like, for killing babies, you satanic monster. I mean, I'm serious. And so they want to crack down. In fact, in a related tweet was some tweets from the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, and she goes, we're going to have abortion remain. And then she's got a whole series of things about why you can't trust these crisis pregnancy centers. They don't provide comprehensive reproductive health care. Let me say this. An abortion clinic does not provide comprehensive health care to the baby because they kill the baby. This is, there's things in the Bible about Moloch, sacrificing children to Moloch. We have a lot to answer for. They're misleading. They don't tell people what they're doing. We got to do your research, watch out for warning signs and that type of thing. I believe this is an Australian news reporter. Do you see what she says? Attractive lady. Ha ha ha, isn't this funny? Mary the Virgin should have had an abortion. Now, she got caught. It's all over social media. So she came out, I need to apologize to some of you. What does that mean? I apologize to some of you, but for that? Are you kidding? So now Biden came out, big announcement. He's got these executive orders. He's got all this stuff he's going to do about, we're going to protect the woman's right to abortion. I don't know that he can legislate it. I don't know that it's possible for the federal government. What you're going to see is you're going to see a focus on the medication availability for abortions, even in states that will end up banning abortion. And they've already filed about 18 lawsuits to stop laws that were on the books that said if Roe is ever overturned, this law becomes effective. Some states are stopping the law from becoming effective. This is not over. This is going to go on and on and on. It's not done. Nobody should get complacent, whichever side of this you're on, because it is still going to be a big fight. So the president, I'm going to play a couple minutes. I think you need to listen to what he said or what he read off of the teleprompter. And so here he is with Vice President Harris and Secretary of Health and Human Services Becerra talking at the White House just a couple days ago. Okay, why am I not getting any sound here? Oh, why did it? I have AirPods, and I must have touched them in my pocket, so the computer doesn't realize what I'm doing. Artificial intelligence is not really there yet. So let's see if this works now. Here is the president.
Now with the Vice President, Secretary Becerra.
Okay, hang on. Now they're in my briefcase. I may have somebody take my briefcase out and blow it up here. Because it's really important that you hear the president, of course. Okay, let's try this again.
Now with the Vice President, Secretary Becerra, and Deputy Attorney General Monaco, I want to talk about an executive order I'm signing to protect reproductive rights of women In the aftermath of the Supreme Court's terrible, extreme, and I think so totally wrong-headed decision, even 150 years ago, the common law and many state laws did not criminalize abortion early in pregnancy, which is very similar to the viability line drawn by Roe. But the Dobbs majority ignores that fact. And the Dobbs majority ignores that many laws are enacted to protect women at the time when they were dying from unsafe abortions. This is the horrific reality that Roe sought to end. The practice of medicine should not, emphasize, should not be frozen in the 19th century. So what happened? The dissenting opinion says as clear as you can possibly say it. And here's the quote. Neither law nor facts nor attitudes have provided any new reason to reach a different result than Roe and Casey did. And has changed, and all that's changed is this court, end of quote. All that's changed is this court. That wasn't about the Constitution or the law. It was about a deep, long-seating antipathy toward Roe and the broader right to privacy. As the justice wrote in their dissent, and I quote, the majority has overruled Roe and Casey for one and only one reason, because it has always despised them, and now it has the votes to discard them, end of quote. So what we're witnessing wasn't a constitutional judgment. It was an exercise in raw political power. On the day the Dobbs decision came down, I immediately announced what I would do, but I also made it clear, based on the reasoning of the court, there is no constitutional right to choose. The only way to fulfill and restore that right for women in this country is by voting, by exercising the power at the ballot box. Let me explain. We need 2 additional pro-choice senators and a pro-choice House to codify Roe as federal law. Your vote can make that a reality. I know it's frustrating, and it made a lot of people very angry, but the truth is this. And it's not just me saying it. It's what the court said. When you read the decision, the court has made clear it will not protect the rights of women. Period. Period. After having made a decision based on a reading of a document that was frozen in time in the 1860s, when women didn't even have the right to vote, the court now practically dares the women of America to go to the ballot box and restore the very rights they've just taken away. One of the most extraordinary parts of the decision, in my view, is the majority writes, and I quote, women, it's a quote now from the majority, women are not without electoral or political power. It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so, end of quote. Repeat the line.
No, but did you see what he did? He's reading off the teleprompter. Here's what he said.
Higher than the percentage of the men who do so, end of quote. Repeat the line.
He's going to the Middle East this week to try to achieve something. Peace, I think he hopes. I'm not optimistic. There's front page articles in the New York Times over the last couple of days saying a lot of people are backing away from this guy because they just don't think he's got it. Even the Financial Times has a big article on the Supreme Court's new power broker, Justice Thomas. I'm fine with that. Here's an editorial from this cartoon from the New York Times or Washington Post. You see what it is that we've put women in barbed wire? You see some symbols used there? Even Politico comes out and says, well, those crazy evangelicals, they were actually meeting with Supreme Court justices. Yeah, that doesn't happen on both sides of this issue. And do you really think that Alito or Thomas or Scalia or even Barrett, they decided to protect unborn children because they had a steak dinner with somebody? And you had to read this article in Politico. There's a guy in there who's referenced a lot, and he's totally caved on the whole thing. It's disgusting. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. And if you watch this, you disgust me what you did, what you've done. You were involved and you got a lot of people to support you, and now you've totally caved. And there's reasons why they caved. And then you see this here, the decision on the EPA thing. This is a guest essay. I think this is the New York Times. The Supreme Court dealt a terrible blow to children's health. You see how they make it about children when it's convenient for them? The ones that want them to pile up dead by the millions? The same people? If hypocrisy were water, the world would drown. Here's another, you're seeing this too. The coming age of the vasectomy. That's from The Spectator. And it actually talks about that. Look, if don't impregnate a woman. I mean, you guys go get a vasectomy. It's even now this will never pass, but this was a bill, Senate Bill 262, introduced by the minority whip in the Ohio State Senate, being enacted by the General Assembly of the state of Ohio. And here's the quote. Any person may bring a civil action against another person who does either of the following. Causes the person to have an unintended pregnancy, regardless of the circumstances. Aids or abets any other person in causing the person to have an unintended pregnancy, regardless of the circumstances. What does that even mean? I can't see because we have the lights turned down in here for video purposes, but how many of you were really unintended from your parents' perspective? I was one. My mother was told she'd never have another kid. And we can argue whether it was lucky for her that I came along or not. And my little brother. No, she was told, Good Samaritan Hospital, or Pittsburgh, she had to have part of her uterus removed when she was pregnant with my sister. They said, you'll never have another child. Well, 6 years later, big surprise. By the way, my brother was the fat baby. I just want that to reverse. I don't know when that reversed, but... and then you can even get injunctive relief to prevent the defendant who is found liable under Section B from causing a person or from aiding or abetting another person and causing a person to have an unintended pregnancy, regardless of the circumstances. So this was put forth by the Senate Minority Whip, Tina Maharath. Ohio Senate 3, I guess that's her district. And then she cites the law, this is already having devastating effects in Ohio, as we learned that a 10-year-old rape victim had to travel out of state to receive an abortion. Okay, let's get the fact checkers on that one. Now, I'm skeptical. It came, by the way, the first person who put it up was a very pro-abortion abortionist. Left-wing pro-abortion. And so the Washington Post tried to fact check it, and they said, well, we really haven't been able to figure it out, whether it's true or not. Okay, let's look at a couple more things. Syria, they're talking about this. I want you to continue to pay attention to this over the next couple of weeks. There's a good article at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs about how Hezbollah is making up a dispute about the oil fields, the maritime borders. Just to recap, line number 1 there at the top, that's what Israel says is the maritime border between Lebanon out, you have to extend it out into the ocean. And there's a way that you do this. And so they say, number 1, for 20 years, Lebanon has said it's line 23. That's the line. That's the border. There was an American guy who came in and said, well, we'll do a compromise line. His name was Hoff. That's why they call it the Hoff line. but nobody accepted that. It was a non-starter for everybody. And then Israel came along, and there's two main fields. There's a field that straddles the maritime border under anybody's rendering of this, the one on the right. And then there's the Karish field, which is a new field that's been discovered. And they brought the ship in through the, I played this was from the front of the Al-Akbar, which is the Hezbollah leading mouthpiece in Lebanon. They brought this giant drilling ship in through the Suez Canal. This is a big deal. They moored it and they've started doing it. And as soon as they started doing it, that's when the drones were flown in. There were 3. Israel shot them down. They had a missile carrier. They also used some missiles from F-16s. And then it just came out this week that before that, there was even another drone that was launched towards this platform. And it was a message by Hezbollah, we could do this. If these were armed, we could damage your platform and take out your gas production. And if you're not going to agree to our thing, you just, you can't do this. So the Karish field, that's the one there that straddles line 29. So what Lebanon does, when they came out first time, and they haven't even done it formally yet, they said, no, did we say line 23? Do you have that in writing? We actually do have that in writing. And we have a mediator from the United States named Aaron Hochstein, who's been going back and forth trying to meet this over the last couple of years. They come out and said, no, we really want line 29. And even Hochstein, who's a lefty, was in the first Obama administration, second Obama administration, and now the third one. He says that's a non-starter. That's never going to happen. And Hezbollah and Lebanon needs the money. But if they would just agree and maybe compromise this thing, Israel would probably drill the one that straddles both the border and split the money with them. And the world needs oil, but the problem is right now is we don't have the infrastructure. And again, I can't remember where I said this, but Europe imports about 185 billion cubic feet, most of it from Russia. And Israel has gas reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean of 40 trillion cubic feet. So Israel really could supply a lot of the gas that Europe needs. Russia has 1,688 trillion. So Israel has 40 trillion. Russia has, 14, 15 times more? There's a total of 122 trillion cubic feet in reserves in the East Med. But the problem is right now is there's no infrastructure to get it to port. Qatar is a big liquefied natural gas. There's no pipelines. Pipelines would be the best way. But because ships can be attacked by drones and that big thing, and especially these big LNG ships with liquefied natural gas on them. I remember back after 9/11 going from downtown Boston, Rose Wharf, over to the airport. A couple times I had to sit out in the middle of the harbor there in Boston for like an hour and a half. I even missed a flight one time because they were bringing in one of these big LNG ships to the port there in Boston. Because they thought, somebody could fly a plane into that and it would be a big boom. And a lot of downtown Boston would be vaporized. I mean, that would be an enormous thing. So, but they don't have that infrastructure in place yet. So Europe is in for a big trouble. This is kind of an interesting thing. We know that Turkey is a significant player in end times Bible prophecy. They have now announced, a lot of people are questioning it. Is this just Erdogan and the Turkish government spouting off because Erdogan's up for re-election sometime in the next year? He could call early elections. That guy has 9 lives politically. It's just like when you think there's no way he's going to survive, he comes back stronger than ever. Something strange going on there. But they found a cache of rare earth minerals that rivals, it's close to what China has. And it says it could supply the world for decades. Actually, if you read into the articles that have been produced. They say that it could, for decades, it could supply the world's rare earth that we need for batteries, like lithium and that type of thing, could supply the world's needs for 1,000 years. That's kind of interesting that they used that particular thing. Here's a quick update. I just have a couple more things that I'm going to do, and I'm really serious. It's a good thing I didn't have time to prepare, huh? You're thinking like, I thought you said you didn't have time to prepare. This is supposed to be dedicated later this year. This is the Abraham family house in Dubai, not in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Remember, the Pope went and signed the document with the Sunni Muslim scholar from Al-Azhar University in Cairo, same place that Barack Obama went and did his first big foreign policy, one of his first big foreign policy speeches back in June of 2009. You should look that up. Go look that thing up. It actually led to the Arab Spring. But anyway, so they have you have the mosque, the church, and a synagogue. I think the synagogue is the one in the middle. And this is the state of construction, so you can see that they're getting on. This is a big, I think, art type thing that's associated with it that they're building. This is what it's supposed to look like when it's done. Here's an architectural rendering of sort of a drive-by that the architect did. I think you'll see the mosque, then the church, then the synagogue in this particular clip. And this is being funded. It's supported by Muslim organizations and church organizations and Jewish organizations. So this is the mosque. And I think this one, that mosque actually might be aimed towards Mecca. Do you know that, this is beside the point, go look up Jay Smith, who's a great apologist and expert on Islam, early history of Islam. And what he's found is that a lot of the early mosques, they all say that they're pointed towards Mecca. It's not true. All the ones like up in Syria, in Israel, and the one on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa, they're pointed towards a different place. Petra. That's kind of interesting. That kind of calls into question a lot of things. So that's why Mordecai Kadar and some others have cited these Islamic scholars. Even an Islamic scholar in Saudi Arabia has come out and said, Muhammad never went to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So you can see this thing, they're getting ready to open it. And I have to tell you, I look at these videos and these renderings, and I just have to say is the place just kind of creeps me out. It just doesn't seem right. And you'll see what it supposedly looks like at night. So it's kind of a creepy place. This is also important. Former Japanese Premier Shinzo Abe was assassinated in Japan a couple days ago, in a country where they don't really are allowed to have guns. But see, now we live in a world where people can do 3D printing and print a plastic gun. Remember the gun that was used in that Clint Eastwood movie, In the Line of Fire? Now people can print that on their computer at home if they have the right thing. So Shinzo Abe, he was a nationalist. People sort of compared him to the Trump of Japan. He was at a campaign rally in the city and he was shot. I think shot once in the chest. I have the video, but I don't want to play it for you because it can be disturbing to watch. But he died probably instantly. Somebody just had it in for him. And I only bring it up because, so we've had one major leader from the UK, Boris Johnson, go down this week, resign. We have Sri Lanka, the president has fled. and now we have a major leader. He was still very influential in Japanese politics, very much against China and its influence, and now Shinzo Abe is dead. And I only bring this up because world wars start sometimes when people don't. What's the trigger? So when we sit here and we look at Scripture and we read Bible prophecy, we see that there are all these wars that are going to happen. And so the question then becomes, well, what's the trigger? I mean, how do these things come about? And go back, this is the New York Times and New York Tribune from June 29th, 1914. And the crown prince for the Austro-Hungarian Empire was in Sarajevo, later called Yugoslavia, and he was assassinated by a Bosnian Serb, I believe. And within a week, wars being declared by countries against other countries, then everybody started jumping in and piling on. And I don't know that there was anybody warning that said, well, when the Austro-Hungarian crown prince is assassinated, then World War I will start. I don't think anybody was saying that, but the world was in a very tense situation. And this happened and the world went to war. And 20 million people died in that war, at least? It changed the world. So this is similar to what I showed you earlier. This is a good editorial cartoon from one of the Arab newspapers. So this is what I was showing you about the anarchy in Sri Lanka. So here's the thing I'm going to end with. Joe Biden is going to the Middle East this week. And he's going to fly from, and he had an editorial up in the Washington Post today saying why I'm going to Saudi Arabia. And a lot of people are upset about that. Why are you going to Saudi Arabia? I mean, they're the ones who killed Khashoggi. And I think this is it, maybe. And he just says, look, I mean, I'm going to read you a quote. This is from, I don't think Biden wrote this. Okay, so if I was, reading from the White House teleprompter, this would say, put up slide of Biden, and then read this quote. And I would repeat that. In Israel, end of line. We helped end a war in Gaza, which could have easily lasted months. It just lasted 11 days. We worked with Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and Jordan to maintain the peace without permitting terrorists to rearm. I think what planet are these people on? On Friday, I will also be the first president to fly from Israel to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Well, there was another president who flew from Saudi Arabia to Tel Aviv, named Donald Trump. Doesn't seem to mention that. That travel will also be a small symbol of the budding relationships and steps. Now, this is important on Bible prophecy and everything, I think, towards normalization between Israel and the Arab world, which my administration is working to deepen and expand. In Jeddah, leaders from across the region will gather, pointing to the possibility of a more stable and integrated Middle East, with the United States playing a vital leadership role. Of course, the region remains full of challenges. Iran's nuclear program, front page in the Jerusalem Post just this morning, IAEA says they got enough uranium for nukes in Iran right now. The Syrian civil war, food security crisis exacerbated by Russia's war against Ukraine. And I might add, and your ridiculous adoption of this stupid green agenda and all this ESG nonsense that you're forcing corporations to do, and human rights standards that remain behind much of the world. When I meet with leaders from across the region, I will make clear how important it is to make progress in these areas. Still, compared to 18 months ago, before he took office, the region is less pressurized and more integrated. Former rivals have reestablished relations. That was happening before you came into office. Iraq, which had long been a source of proxy conflicts and regional rivalries, now serves as a platform for diplomacy, including between Saudi Arabia and Iran. My friend King Abdullah of Jordan recently referred to the new vibe in the region, with countries asking, how can we connect with each other and with each other? And here's his interview with CNBC.
What are you hoping to hear from President Biden? Because this is an administration that many would criticize in saying they've been out of touch with the region.
There has been this narrative out there for a while that the U.S. is out of the region and other parts of the world. I've never bought into that. I believe that where the relationships between Europe and the United States were not that good recently, what the Ukrainian-Russian conflict did is bring a very strong European-American alliance back. And I believe that the message that the president, one of the messages that he brings to the region is that count on the West, count on Europe and the United States, because we are going to be actively engaged, as he will have probably the same messages for the Americas and for Africa and for Asia.
Yeah. One of the things that folks in the United States are very much focused on, obviously, is the relationship between Israel and the rest of the Middle East. And we've seen the Israelis come out with a Middle East air defense alliance in the last few days. Is this something that Jordan is looking to be a part of in an effort to combat Iran?
Well, those are issues that are being discussed regionally. I think we want to look at the bigger picture. And one of the issues are based on regional projects. We want to see how inclusive we can be. And again, if I was in Iran looking at the regional projects and how a lot of this is moving towards the West, where's my part in that?
Yeah.
And so can we put political differences aside to do something right for the peoples of the region? And I think that's where we're heading more on these discussions.
Do you think we need a NATO for the Middle East?
So NATO's can be complicated if you don't understand what the charter is and what the mission statement is. I believe you can build a NATO with like-minded countries, and that's something that I've always believed in. We in Jordan have a rapid deployment force. We work actively with NATO all over the world, have been for ages. The relationship with NATO from a Jordanian perspective is actually we're partners. And I'd like to see more countries in the area come into that mix. But we've got to very clearly define what is our role. That relationship with NATO is extremely special. We are fighting shoulder to shoulder and have been for decades.
So, I mean, get familiar with this region, because I think it's going to be a lot. And we'll finish up with this. So here's Turkey. So understand Turkey is very important. Look at the ships that have to get through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. Some of that is only 700 meters wide, less than half a mile. So Turkey really controls a lot of this. And what's going on in the region in Turkey, this is a NASA map that they put up about the blue areas are winter wheat and winter crops. The yellow areas, of course, they use the colors of Ukraine. Those are summer crops, and you can see the areas circled in red where Russia is in control. So that's going to have a big problem. And my understanding is this is a picture of a Ukrainian wheat field as we speak in the midst of this crisis. And now there's one other thing. Here's Iran. The Ayatollah Khomeini was born in 1939. That makes him 83 years old. He's getting up there. He's in bad health. He's had cancer. And so the question is, they replaced this intelligence chief. Now, some people say, well, they replaced the intelligence chief because the Mossad was coming in and killing a bunch of us Iranian intelligence people. He wasn't doing a very good job. But I don't think they threw him in prison or anything like that, but it appears from what people are saying that are watching this is that Iran wants to put in place younger leaders so they can control the next generation. I mean, they're having riots in Iran and that type of thing, and be a good time for governments to kind of support the people that oppose the government there. But you don't know what's going to come out of that. And you need to understand that who will be the next supreme leader. And so Alma Research based in northern Israel, up along the Lebanon border, has a great article on their website just the other day. And they said, we don't know, but look at what it says in the Iranian Constitution. Clause 7 in the Iranian Constitution, adopted in 1979 at the time of the revolution, states, in the absence of the Mahdi, that's this Islamic end times coming leader, the leadership of the Iranian nation will be placed in the hands of a man of faith possessing administrative and management capabilities. And so, since 1989, the Ayatollah Khomeini has been in charge, 33 years. And now there's going to be a big scramble to find out who that is. And this is from their constitution. The appointment of the supreme leader who holds the religious title, Ayatollah Atma, God's biggest wonder, is for life. And not like the Iranian president. So will it be Raisi? Will it be Khomeini's son? Will it be somebody else? There's going to be a big scramble for power. And the other interesting thing about the Iranian Constitution is the person who comes to power as the supreme leader does not need to be Persian. So, for example, Khomeini, his father was Azerbaijani and his mother was Persian. But they could have somebody who's all Azerbaijani. So this raises a whole lot of interesting scenarios. They could even have somebody who's, let me just throw one out there, a Syrian. That's kind of interesting. Especially when you have somebody leading Turkey right now, who's big on the Mahdi, even though he's Sunni, whose family comes from the Assyrian region. Did you know that? Erdogan? It's all kind of interesting. So we'll see how this all plays out. Iran is doing a lot of things. They're doing a lot of activity in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean with their different boats. They have missile ships and things that are patrolling the areas, and it's very interesting. So we'll try to do a midweek update this week if I can free up the time. Certainly we'll be back next week. Interesting times. A lot of things geopolitically that are causing disruptions, I think are going to cause disruptions. And eventually we know that Jesus is going to return and set all of this right. And we look forward to that thing. Come quickly, Lord. Let's just get it done. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. We pray, Lord, that you will bless us this week, give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Bless us this as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.